Millionaire CEO was in the middle of a business meeting until two boys asked him to call their mom. Have you ever imagined what would happen if a high-stakes corporate meeting was suddenly interrupted by two fearless young boys demanding to see their mom, right in front of a millionaire CEO? That's exactly the jaw-dropping moment that kicks off our story. In the middle of discussing massive business deals, the last thing Elias Cross expects is a blast from his past, especially in the form of two children who call him Dad. What unfolds next is a heartwarming journey of discovery, forgiveness, and second chances that you absolutely don't want to miss. Curious to find out how Elias handles this incredible twist of fate? Stick around and listen to our full story to see how two kids manage to break through the toughest walls of a powerful tycoon. Before you dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories that will tug at your heartstrings and keep you on the edge of your seat. Elias Cross was known throughout New York City's elite circles for two things: his razor-sharp business acumen and his almost uncanny ability to control any situation. Tall, composed, and impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit, Elias commanded the respect of colleagues and rivals alike. On that brisk autumn morning, he sat at the head of a sleek, polished conference table on the 50th floor of the Cross Global Enterprises skyscraper, high above the bustling streets below. A panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline stretched out behind him, but Elias rarely spared it more than a passing glance. He was laser-focused on the negotiation unfolding before him, a complex merger that promised to reshape the real estate market if everything went according to plan. The other executives in the boardroom were hand-picked leaders of their own industries, each carefully chosen for their expertise. They sat with stiff postures, exchanging looks and subtle nods, fully aware of the enormous sums of money at stake. Whenever Elias spoke, the room fell silent. They were used to his methods, the long pauses, the occasional pointed question, the subtle reminders of whose turf they were on. In Elias's world, time equaled power, and he used both judiciously. He had built Cross Global from the ground up over the last decade, making it a paragon of corporate efficiency. Under his leadership, the company soared to near mythical status in the realms of investment, finance, and property development. That morning, everything seemed to be progressing smoothly. The opposing negotiators delivered their final pitch with a mixture of confidence and nervous anticipation. Elias listened, occasionally tapping a pen against the notes in front of him, but otherwise remained expressionless. He had practiced this demeanor for years, unreadable and calm under pressure, knowing silence often unnerved the other side. After a short pause, he leaned in, offering a countermove that tilted the scales just enough in his favor. The older gentleman across from him swallowed hard, and Elias almost felt a twinge of sympathy. Almost. It was in this tension-filled moment that the imposing mahogany doors at the far end of the conference room swung open, startling everyone. Elias's assistant, Meredith Lowe, was usually so meticulous about preventing disturbances that any unannounced interruption was almost unthinkable. Heads turned in unison toward the doorway. Elias's frown deepened, but before he could voice his frustration, he noticed something highly unusual. Instead of one of his senior staff members rushing in with urgent news, two young boys, no older than 9, stepped nervously into the room. They were dressed neatly but casually, wearing matching collared shirts and jeans. One boy, slightly taller and with unruly dark hair, held himself with a curious blend of determination and unease. The other, younger and with bright eyes that darted around the room, clutched his brother's arm. They appeared wholly out of place among the corporate titans and polished surfaces. The tension in the atmosphere shifted from high-stakes business to something else entirely, something deeply personal and unexpected. Elias stood halfway, confusion etched across his usually composed features. He cast a questioning glance at Meredith, who hurried in right behind the boys, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Cross, I'm so sorry," she blurted out. They insisted on seeing you. I tried to explain you were in a meeting." But the taller boy interrupted politely yet firmly, as though he had rehearsed these words. "We need to find our mother. Her name is Monica Delacroix. She was supposed to meet someone named Elias Cross." At the mention of that name, Monica Delacroix, Elias felt the steady rhythm of his world falter. He hadn't heard that name in 10 years. In a life defined by careful planning and strict boundaries, This moment felt like an earthquake beneath his feet. The slightest tremor of recognition passed through him, and he wondered if the boy noticed. This woman had once meant everything to him. Had the past come knocking at his door in the most improbable way? And if so, what exactly did these two young boys have to do with it? For a long moment, the entire boardroom seemed frozen in place. The senior executives glanced from Elias to the two boys, unsure whether to intervene, speak, or remain silent. Even the older negotiator, who had been battling through intense corporate strategies just seconds earlier, seemed caught off guard by the sudden personal turn of events. Elias cleared his throat, forcing himself to regain some semblance of composure. Then he stood up fully and motioned for Meredith to come closer. His voice was unusually quiet. "Meredith, who let them in?" Her face went pale. "I'm not sure. They came in through the main lobby looking for you, and when security tried to redirect them to our reception area, they mentioned something about an urgent family matter. The guard called me, and I tried to stall them, but they refused to wait." She paused, casting a sympathetic look at the boys. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross. They were very persistent." Elias nodded, swallowing the questions piling up inside his mind. Family matter? He had no children, at least none that he knew of. He had never married. His name was often linked to the business tabloids, occasionally with rumors of relationships or short-lived flings, but nothing had ever lasted. And yet these two boys, so self-assured in their quest, appeared certain that their mother had a meeting with him. He slowly shifted his gaze to the boys. The older one had introduced himself as Damon, while the younger, Finn, glanced around with an air of fascination that only a child thrust into a grown-up's world might display. Damon carried himself with a maturity that belied his age, though there was a flicker of nervous energy in his eyes, as if he was wrestling with whether he should stand his ground or retreat. "I'm Elias Cross," he finally said, addressing them directly. "You mentioned your mother, Monica Delacroix, is supposed to meet me. Do you know if she's here in the building?" Finn stepped forward, nodding. "Yes, she said she was coming to meet you. We got bored in the waiting area, so we—" He hesitated, glancing at Damon. "We decided to come find you instead." A ripple of murmured amusement traveled around the table, but Elias's mind was elsewhere. He heard the name Monica Delacroix echo in his memories, recalling a chapter of his life he had effectively buried. They had met in college. He'd been an ambitious finance major, while Monica had been studying international relations. Their worlds had collided in a swirl of late-night library sessions, weekend concerts, and boundless dreams. For a while, they were inseparable. But as Elias set his sights on building an empire, the distance between them grew. When the opportunity of a lifetime arose for him to expand his fledgling business overseas, they parted ways with little more than tears and angry words. He had always assumed she moved on, just as he had, never anticipating that she would reappear like this. Before he could say anything more, Meredith straightened, pressing a finger to her earpiece. She nodded briskly, then turned to Elias. "Security says Miss Delacroix is on her way up. Should I escort these boys out in the meantime?" Elias glanced at Damon and Finn, noticing their tense posture, their worried eyes. He could guess how terrifying a huge corporate boardroom might feel for two young kids. Yet some part of him, the part that remembered Monica with fondness and guilt, couldn't bring himself to dismiss them. He exhaled, turning to face the other executives. "Let's take a short recess. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. The negotiators exchanged looks, but silently gathered their documents. Elias sensed the tension and confusion in the room, but no one dared question him. The corners of his mouth tensed as he waited. Within a minute, the boardroom emptied, leaving only Elias, the two boys, and Meredith. Moments later, the doors to the boardroom opened once again, and there she stood, Monica Delacroix. She looked both familiar and profoundly different. The woman Elias remembered from college had worn her curls in a loose ponytail, often clad in jeans and sneakers, as she raced between classes. Now she was every bit the professional, her stylish blazer and pencil skirt accentuating a calm confidence, her dark curls framing a face that held a quiet determination. Time had softened some features and sharpened others, but those distinctive eyes remained the same. Her gaze swept across the room, taking in Elias, the sleek table, and finally settling on Damon and Finn. If she was surprised by their presence here, she hid it well. She exhaled, then walked forward with measured steps. The sound of her heels clicking against the polished floor was uncomfortably loud in the hush that had fallen over the room. "Elias," she said, inclining her head in greeting, her voice steady yet tinged with an undercurrent of tension. He managed a nod, though his thoughts were anything but calm. "Monica, it's been a long time." Her eyes flicked toward Damon and Finn, who hovered a few steps behind her. "I didn't expect them to follow me up here. I apologize for the interruption. It wasn't my intention to disrupt your meeting." Elias steadied himself, steeling his features into something more unreadable. "It's fine. They said you were meeting me. I didn't realize..." He trailed off, uncertain how to complete the sentence. He had so many questions boiling under the surface. Why now? Why this building? Why had she kept her distance for a decade? And most pressing of all, were these children, her children, somehow connected to him? Monica seemed to sense the unspoken torrent of questions. She looked at her sons and quietly told them, "Damon, Finn, wait for me outside with Miss Lowe. I need to have a word with Mr. Cross." Finn looked reluctant. His curious gaze bounced between Monica and Elias, as if trying to piece together a puzzle far beyond his 9 years. Damon, slightly older and more controlled, gently took Finn's hand and led him out, casting one last glance toward Elias before the door closed behind them. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The hush felt loaded with history, unresolved and palpable. The last time Elias had seen Monica, they had been in their early 20s. He had launched a small but promising startup. She had been on the brink of working for an international NGO. Their worlds seemed both intimately connected and worlds apart. Elias leaned against the table, arms folded, striving to keep his composure. "I never thought I'd see you again," he admitted. Monica nodded slowly. "Same, but here we are." She moved to the head of the table, where Elias had previously been seated. Her eyes rested on the plush executive chair, then lifted to meet his. "Elias, I'm here because I need your help. The last thing I wanted was to barge into your professional life like this. But I didn't have a choice, and I certainly didn't expect Damon and Finn to wander into your boardroom unannounced." Elias's mind spun. He wanted to ask about the boys. Were they his? The memory of Monica's tears the night they parted ways still haunted him. How could she have hidden something like this for so long, if indeed he was their father? Or was she married in the intervening years to someone else? He forced himself to remain outwardly calm, but inside, questions churned with increasing urgency. "Go on," he said gently, noticing how uncharacteristically tentative his voice sounded. He usually never showed uncertainty, yet something about Monica, in the possibility those kids were his, cut straight to the core of him. Monica inhaled, exhaling a moment later as though she were carefully measuring each word. "First, let me explain the basics. Damon is 10, Finn is 9. We live in Brooklyn. I work as a consultant for several nonprofits, mostly focusing on international relief efforts. Over the years, I've had to move around quite a bit for my job, but I eventually settled here when the boys were old enough for school. They're good kids, smart, resilient, and curious." She paused, her expression flickering with maternal pride. Elias could hardly breathe. The timeline made sense. If Damon was 10 and Finn 9, that put their births right around the time he and Monica had severed ties. His chest tightened. He willed himself not to jump to conclusions, but found it nearly impossible to ignore the glaring possibility. Monica continued, folding her hands together. "I've been handling everything on my own. I never wanted to rely on anyone else. But recently, I hit a serious roadblock with one of my consulting contracts, funding cuts. They want me to relocate to a conflict area if I want to stay on board. But that's not feasible with 2 kids, and frankly, I don't want to uproot them again. I had a different plan, a new initiative that needed investment. That's why I set up a meeting with your company in the first place, to propose a partnership that could help keep my initiative afloat and also benefit Cross Global's philanthropic wing." She gave a wry, almost apologetic smile. "I had no idea you were still at the helm. All the business headlines I've caught in passing mention Cross Global's expansion, but I never connected it directly to you, not until I made the appointment and saw your name." Elias listened, his eyes never leaving her face. He wasn't sure whether to feel relieved that this wasn't some staged confrontation or be more alarmed that it was all so coincidental. But was it truly coincidence, or had fate decided to intervene? He struggled to keep his thoughts in order. "And Damon and Finn?" he asked, his voice betraying a rare uncertainty. She studied him carefully. "They're mine." A beat of silence followed. Then she added, "Ours." Elias felt the floor tilt beneath him. It was an odd sensation, like standing at the precipice of a life-altering realization, but not knowing how far the drop would be. For years, he had told himself that leaving Monica had been the correct choice. His unstoppable ambition demanded full attention, free from the distractions of a serious relationship. But now those justifications felt hollow. Had he truly made a choice that cost him a decade of fatherhood? He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a ragged breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" Monica stepped closer, her gaze fierce yet tinged with regret. "Because you walked away, Elias. We were both young, and you made it clear that your work mattered more than anything else. I told myself I'd never force anyone to be part of my life or theirs. I didn't want to beg you or chase after you. So I left, finished my degree, and started working. By the time I realized I was pregnant, I assumed you'd only resent me if I showed up saying, 'Surprise, you're a father.'" Her voice didn't waver, but Elias could sense the heartbreak beneath her calm exterior. Guilt churned in his gut. The unstoppable momentum of his career had carried him to unimaginable heights, yet he'd apparently missed what should have been the most important moments of his personal life. He swallowed hard, letting silence settle between them for a brief stretch. "Do they know about me?" A flicker of pain crossed Monica's expression. "They know bits and pieces. They know you exist, that we were close once, but it's not like I had much to tell them. I kept my distance, believing it was better for them. Maybe I was protecting myself too." Elias let his gaze drift toward the closed doors behind which Damon and Finn waited. The weight of Monica's revelation pressed heavily on him, making the polished floor beneath his feet feel uncertain. If everything she said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her at this point, then he had children he never even knew about. All the late nights he spent scrutinizing financial charts, the weekends lost to business travel, the countless victories celebrated in quiet penthouse suites, none of them could compare to what he had missed. "I owe them an explanation," he said, voice subdued. He never thought he'd hear such vulnerability in his own tone, yet here he was, feeling as though every armor plate he wore had been stripped away. "I owe you one too," Monica nodded, glancing toward the door. "They might be anxious right now. Damon's protective of Finn, especially when it comes to new or tense situations." Her concern for the boys tugged at something deep inside Elias. On a professional level, he could be as cold and calculating as necessary, but fatherhood wasn't something that could be negotiated or planned in a day. He walked to the door and opened it, finding Damon and Finn with Meredith. Finn was fiddling with a small toy car, his gaze darting between the passing strangers in suits, while Damon stood protectively near him. The moment Finn noticed Elias, he straightened. "Is our mom okay?" he asked, voice small but steady. Elias cleared his throat and nodded. "She's fine. Why don't you come in?" Damon gave Meredith a polite smile and guided Finn back into the boardroom. Monica beckoned them closer, placing an arm around each. The tension was evident in Damon's eyes, and Elias could see the countless questions forming in his mind. But for a moment, the boy remained silent, waiting for an adult to take the lead. Elias took a slow breath, forcing himself to meet their gazes. "I'm Elias Cross," he began, feeling strangely formal. "Your mother and I knew each other a long time ago. He paused, suddenly at a loss for how one addresses their own children for the first time. The magnitude of it all was staggering. "I didn't realize until today that you existed." Damon's expression was a complex mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Finn, on the other hand, looked up at Elias with wide eyes, searching for a clue about who this stranger might really be to them. Monica offered a gentle nudge. "Damon, Finn, Elias is your father." Her words were plain, direct, and delivered with a mother's firm resolve. The silence stretched out. Damon's jaw tightened a fraction, as if he were sorting through the puzzle pieces of his life. Finn blinked rapidly, then asked in a small voice, "Why didn't you know about us?" The question hit Elias like a punch to the stomach. How did he begin to explain a decade of absence, missed birthdays, and a yawning chasm where a paternal presence should have been? Looking at the two boys, he understood that no quick or smooth-talking explanation could erase the hurt. "I left before your mom realized she was pregnant," Elias said quietly, choosing honesty over any sanitized version of events. "I made some mistakes I really regret now." Finn's bottom lip trembled for a moment, but he steeled himself, clearly determined not to cry in front of this man who was a stranger, yet also something far more than a stranger could ever be. Damon, a year older and a shade taller, studied Elias with a focus that belied his age. It reminded Elias uncomfortably of boardroom adversaries who examined every word and gesture for weakness. Monica gave both boys a reassuring squeeze. "I know this is a lot to take in. It's a lot for me too, but we'll figure it out, together." Elias felt the corners of his eyes sting. He quickly shifted his posture, as though standing taller would somehow contain the surge of emotion. "I'd like to do whatever it takes to be part of your lives," he said, keeping his focus on the boys. "That means I'll need to learn who you are, what you like, what you don't like, and I know that can't happen overnight." Finn peered at Damon, seemingly asking for guidance without words. Damon exhaled, then turned his gaze back to Elias. "I guess we should start somewhere. Maybe you can help me with my math homework." There was a moment of stunned stillness, and then Monica's lips curled into a faint smile. "Damon's in an advanced math class," she explained, running her hand over his curly hair. "He's always been a whiz with numbers." A gentle laugh escaped Elias, an unfamiliar sound in these tense surroundings. "Math, huh? I might be able to help with that. I did a fair amount of math in my day." Finn's shoulders, previously tense, relaxed a fraction. "I like to play soccer. Do you?" Elias smiled again, though it still felt new to show this kind of warmth in a corporate setting. "I used to play in high school," he confessed. "I'm probably rusty, but I'd be willing to try." The conversation was tentative and awkward, yet there was a glimmer of hope beneath each spoken word. For the first time in as long as Elias could remember, he felt wholly unsure about his next steps. Normally, he thrived on negotiations, but no business manual covered reintroductions to one's children after a decade. Still, there was a relief in finally facing the truth. Monica cleared her throat, bringing the emotional moment to a close. "We should probably continue this conversation in a more private setting. It's been a chaotic morning, and I'm sure you still have work. Maybe we can talk tonight or tomorrow?" Elias nodded, grateful for the practical suggestion. He glanced at his watch, a reflex he'd developed over years of rigorous scheduling. "I'll have Meredith reschedule my remaining meetings. This is more important." Finn's eyes widened. "You can just cancel your work?" A faint grin tugged at Elias's lips. "When you're the CEO, yes you can." The boys exchanged a glance as though reassessing the man before them. Perhaps, Elias realized, this was the first time they truly understood he wasn't just any businessman. He was the head of a large empire, and just as that empire had demanded nearly every minute of his life until now. These two children, his children, were about to rewrite all his priorities. Monica had insisted on taking Damon and Finn back to their apartment for the afternoon, saying they needed time to process. Despite Elias's immediate desire to whisk them away for ice cream, to ask them endless questions, to make up for lost time in an instant, he understood she was right. He couldn't expect them to integrate him into their lives without a chance to breathe. So he stood in the lobby of Cross Global Enterprises and watched them leave. Damon walked on one side, protective as ever, while Finn lingered at the glass doors, casting a brief look back before stepping onto the sidewalk. Returning to his office felt surreal. The sun was still high, the same city sounds buzzed in the distance, yet everything within Elias had changed. He walked past subordinates who greeted him with the usual deference, but his response was distracted. For the first time in his professional life, he felt that the problems occupying the next quarter's projections or the renegotiation of that merger were trivial compared to what had just exploded into his personal life. Inside his expansive corner suite, he paced. He tried to review a pending contract, but the words blurred. His mind conjured up images of Damon's cautious, intelligent eyes and Finn's unguarded curiosity. Each memory hammered home the fact that he had missed nearly a decade of fatherhood. How did one reclaim those lost years? He pressed the intercom, summoning Meredith. She entered quietly, her expression a blend of professionalism and genuine concern. After working for Elias for over 4 years, she'd never seen him this unsettled. "Meredith," he began, loosening his tie as if it were choking him, "I need you to arrange something." "Flowers? No, that seems impersonal." "A gift for the boys, something they'd actually want." "I'm not sure. Maybe soccer gear for Finn and something related to math or puzzles for Damon. Make it tasteful, nothing over the top, and I need you to figure out how to get it to them discreetly. Also, please clear my schedule for the next few days, aside from urgent matters." Meredith jotted down notes, nodding. "Certainly. If I might suggest perhaps a small welcome gesture for Miss Delacroix too? I recall you used to mention a certain coffee shop she liked back in your college days." Elias paused, startled she remembered. He rarely spoke of his past, but Meredith had a knack for filing away details. "Right. She used to love that place on the Lower East Side. Acacia Roasters, if I recall correctly." Meredith gave a small smile. "I'll handle it. And Mr. Cross, Elias, let me know if you need anything else, okay?" He nodded, a flicker of gratitude crossing his features. "Thanks, Meredith." That evening, as dust settled over the city, Elias found himself in his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast reflections of glittering skyscrapers all around him, but he barely noticed. His phone sat on the marble countertop, mocking him with the silence from Monica. The rational side of him knew better than to expect an immediate call. The emotional side bristled with impatience. Eventually, the phone did ring. Her voice sounded both tired and determined. "Tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock. Meet us at Stanton Park in Brooklyn. The boys love the playground there, and we can talk while they run around." He agreed without hesitation, a strange mix of nerves and excitement buzzing through him. After the call ended, he stared at the phone for a few moments before deciding to do something he rarely did: take a walk outside, alone with no business agenda. As he strolled through the bustling streets, concealed by the anonymity of the city's crowd, he tried to imagine what tomorrow might bring. He pictured Damon and Finn swinging from monkey bars, or maybe chasing each other through the grass. Would they be excited to see him? Tentative? Resentful? The fear of their potential rejection loomed, yet a small, steady voice inside reminded him of the vow he'd silently made. He would not walk away. Not again. The next day, Elias arrived at Stanton Park a full half-hour early. He wore a casual sweater and jeans, an attire that felt foreign after years of formal suits, but he wanted to show he could adapt. The park was a hive of weekend energy: joggers running along the curved path, teenagers gathered by the basketball court, parents pushing toddlers on the swings. The smell of roasted peanuts and funnel cakes wafted from a nearby vendor's cart. Elias found a bench beneath a tall oak tree that offered partial shade. The sun was warm for an autumn afternoon, bathing everything in a golden glow. He watched children playing catch, felt the crunch of leaves underfoot as people strolled by, and tried to calm the swirl of anticipation building inside him. Eventually, Monica arrived with Damon and Finn, both boys walking on either side of her. The moment Elias stood up, Finn spotted him and waved. That little gesture, so simple yet full of promise, eased some of the tension coiled in Elias's chest. Damon, on the other hand, maintained a more reserved demeanor, though he gave a polite nod in Elias's direction. "Hey," Monica greeted, meeting Elias's eyes. "Hi," he replied, managing a small smile. He then turned his attention to Damon and Finn. "Thanks for coming." Finn bounded forward, unable to contain his excitement. "Look what I got." He pulled a small soccer ball from behind his back. "The lady at your office, Meredith, sent it this morning. It's so cool." Elias's lips curved into a genuine smile. "I'm glad you like it. Did she also send the puzzle book for Damon?" Damon nodded, hugging the book to his side protectively. "It's a geometry puzzle set. I've never seen some of these shapes before. It's interesting. Monica cast Elias a sideways glance that revealed a touch of relief. Perhaps she'd worried he would lavish them with over-the-top gifts, trying to buy their affections. But these gifts were thoughtful, reflecting genuine interest rather than extravagance. For the next hour, they navigated the awkwardness of small talk laced with monumental significance. Damon and Finn ran off to try the playground equipment, the soccer ball tucked under Finn's arm. Elias and Monica settled on a nearby bench, close enough to watch the boys, but far enough to speak privately. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Did Damon like reading science fiction? Did Finn have a favorite soccer team? What were their bedtime routines, their favorite meals, their fears, their goals, their dreams? But the enormity of it all weighed on him, and he sensed Monica's caution. They would have to ease into these topics. "I appreciate you coming," he murmured, "and I'm sorry if I overstepped with the gifts." Monica shook her head. "They're fine. You did well. Damon is just careful. He's always looking for what's behind someone's actions. Finn is more trusting, but he needs reassurance that things will stay consistent. They both need consistency." Elias nodded, absorbing the advice. "I want to be consistent for them, for you." He paused, glancing towards where Damon and Finn were now chasing each other across the grass. "I never imagined myself as a father, especially not like this. But I can't change the lost years. All I can do is be here now." Monica's eyes softened. "Then let's figure it out, one step at a time. No big declarations of how this is all going to be perfect overnight. Just step by step." Over the following weeks, a new kind of rhythm took shape in Elias's life. Mornings once dominated by back-to-back meetings now included phone calls to Monica about the boys' schedules, who had soccer practice, when Damon needed help preparing for a school math contest, or whether Finn wanted to sign up for an art class. Elias learned to juggle, not just portfolios and contracts, but also father-son bonding time in the form of weekend outings, movie nights, and occasional dinners at Monica's apartment in Brooklyn. The first time he set foot in that modest, cozy apartment, the contrast with his lavish penthouse struck him. Books on global policy and children's novels lined the shelves. Artworks made by the boys in elementary school hung on the fridge. It was a world away from the polished surfaces of high-rise corporate offices. Yet Elias found comfort there, an authenticity that he realized he had been missing in his meticulously controlled existence. Damon grew more talkative, though he remained guarded in moments when Elias asked about deeper feelings. He would share tidbits, a math problem he found challenging, or a fact about the solar system that intrigued him. Finn was less reserved, prone to animated retellings of soccer matches, comedic mishaps at school, or random observations about the world. Still, in unguarded instances, like when a loud sound startled him or when he got frustrated with a math problem, it was Damon who stepped in, protective as ever, confirming the bond the two brothers shared. Monica often stood in the background during these interactions, letting Elias find his own footing. She recognized that Damon and Finn had to learn to trust Elias on their own terms, without her orchestrating every interaction. At the same time, she offered gentle guidance, hinting that Elias might want to show up early to Damon's math competition, or reminding him that Finn loved plain cheese pizza and hated pepperoni. Gradually, Elias learned that fatherhood wasn't about grand gestures, though he tried some of those too, but about the accumulation of small, consistent acts, helping Damon with homework, kicking a soccer ball around with Finn in the park, telling them silly jokes, or simply being there on a lazy Sunday afternoon, watching cartoons. For a man used to seeing relationships as potential business assets or liabilities, it was a revelation to invest time and care with no expectation of return, except maybe a fleeting smile or a laugh. Inevitably, Monica and Elias found moments alone, during which they navigated the complicated terrain of their past. She admitted she had been afraid of his ambition, of losing herself in his shadow. He confessed that he had buried the regret of leaving her, telling himself it was the only way to build a legacy. The presence of Damon and Finn forced them to re-examine the shape of that legacy. Was it an empire built on real estate and finance, or the lives of two incredible boys who were brimming with potential? One late evening after Damon and Finn had dozed off on the couch in Monica's living room, tired from an impromptu movie night, Elias gently covered them with a blanket. The sight of them, peaceful and content, made his chest constrict with a tenderness he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. Monica joined him, and they stood in silence for a while, watching the boys sleep. In that hush of shared contemplation, Elias reached for Monica's hand. She allowed her fingers to intertwine with his. The road ahead still held questions. Where would they live? Would they try to be a couple again, or simply co-parents who respected each other? How would Damon and Finn truly react over the long run, once the novelty of having a father wore off? But for now, none of that could overshadow the simple, profound truth that they were, at last, standing together as a family. Imperfect, in progress, and real. Elias didn't promise it would be easy. He didn't promise it would be smooth. What he did promise in the quiet of that living room was that he would stay. And in return, Monica squeezed his hand just a bit tighter, as though acknowledging the power of that promise. No corporate deal, no boardroom victory had ever brought Elias across the sense of meaningful belonging he felt in that moment. Sometimes the simplest step, just being present, becomes the greatest achievement of all. As Monica's head rested gently against his shoulder, and the soft breathing of Damon and Finn floated through the dimly lit room, Elias understood he was finally building something that truly mattered. Looking back on this journey, I can't help but feel a deep admiration for Elias Cross and the brave steps he took to claim a place in the hearts of Damon and Finn. In a world driven by profit margins and status, seeing a powerful CEO become a father, learning patience and vulnerability is truly inspiring. Each moment, from their first awkward introduction to building science projects in a living room, has proven that genuine love thrives where consistency, understanding, and honesty take root. As the final chapters of this story unfold, there's no denying the uplifting message it carries. Sometimes the greatest success lies not in corporate achievements, but in the simple, priceless bond of family. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Elias's journey and how he navigated such a big shift in his life. Please leave a comment and share your opinions. Let's keep the conversation going and celebrate stories that remind us of what truly matters.